Hi everyone, I hope you're good guys. Welcome to a new video. Today part 2 of my Techno 4 Ableton template explanation. Last week we talked about the sound design, composition, the MIDI, each track, individually why it's been made, what purpose it serves. And today we're gonna talk more about the arrangement, the automation and variation, how you make it sound less boring, and a little bit about mixing and mastering as well. So this template I've been creating live during my live stream session on my other Audioreakt channel. I'll put the link in the description. I go live every 2 Sundays. And I create a track from scratch, and you can come around, ask some questions, participate. And yeah, let's have a listen to the track. And then you have another part with more like kind of a pad sound. Alright, so last week I talked a little bit about each element and their purpose during the track. Just to summarize what I said, I had 2 synths which are more like kind of a linear dub chord synth, which are like the backbone of the track. And I will have some stab main hook sound which is gonna pop here and there, which are kind of our main lead. So our 2 backbone track are this, which are more rhythmical, and then you have some chords coming on top, some from time to time. Here, and you have this one as well. So this allows me to have like kind of a linear guideline and like a linear structure, and then putting some element popping here and there on the top. But then what will happen eventually, I will need to take a break from this chord, because obviously if you just play the same things all the whole track, it gets very boring. So I decided to add a pad, which is gonna be kind of a lead pad. It's not gonna be like just a pad you put in the background. It's a quite strong pad with some phaser flanger effect, which sound like this. Very rhythmical as well. You can hear there is a lot of movement. Got a lot of character, and this is gonna take over at one point in the track to add a bit of variation. So that's how globally I build the track. Will have them obviously your intro, the chorus one where I will introduce the main stab. Then you have a breakdown where I will introduce the pad. Then is the pad playing, and then after you have another part where the pad and the chord are playing together. So then you have a structure like intro, part A, break, part B, and then part A plus B, and then outro. So that's our global main arrangement idea. Now we're gonna go over each part especially and tell you a little bit more about. So for this track I decided to start without any kick or bass. It's just like the backbone chord synth which are playing, and then we will add some drums, and then after the kick's gonna drop. So that's how it starts, the intro, these 2 synths, and you have this noisy things playing. You have a low pass filter which open, and then I wanted to start with some drums. Then I'm gonna have some effect on my mixdown which is gonna build a bit of tension. So for the transition, for example, here you could hear like some stuff happening. I have 3 return here that I will use. I will come back to it after, but one is kind of a washout effect, and the 2 other are like some reverse delay and pitch reverse delay. And I usually send some of the synth here, send A, send C, send B. So that I use just before a new part, to introduce something new. I send everything in the return, and it creates this washout effect. And on top of that, I will use as well sometimes on the mixdown. I have this riser effect, which is kind of a DJ washout effect, which brings your sound into a lot of delay and reverb. So if you feel this kind of sound rising up, like kind of bringing up the tension, that's what this rack does. And you will have as well some low cut from time to time. Obviously, just before to add the element, I will use this kind of classic low cut to introduce sound. For example here. So that's how we do. Alright, so then I introduce so the kick and the bass, like you could hear. So we are already going pretty strong as the hats and everything is going hard already. And then we're gonna add some shaker, and we're gonna add our main chord, which is gonna start to play as well. I have this weird organic texture which is gonna start to play in the background as well. So that's everything what came here. With this weird organic texture and the shaker. So here the idea, so we had the intro and then we have the kick bass. Things are going pretty fast and are pretty driving already, and the idea is already to quickly build the momentum. And then you can see here we're gonna start to get rid of all of the drums. So we have, it's just to add some contrast, we already have something with a lot of element, a lot of energy, and we're gonna build up the tension and then drop with no drums and less element, and you're gonna see what effect it does. It's gonna be a low cut as well. After 8 bar, we reintroduce some drums and some other elements. You have now this chord 3 element which is coming. Adding some extra drums. You have this noise as well, which is add a bit of groove. And then the ride coming with back this organic bloopy sound. And yeah, so that from that part of the track we had already the chord playing for more than 2 minutes 40, like the backbone chord, and then we have the main chord which is playing for around 1 minute and a half. So we need to add some variation, so that's why we're gonna introduce a breakdown and we're gonna add the pad, and we use the breakdown to introduce the pad. So here for the breakdown, to avoid to have a too brutal transition, we're gonna start to get rid of things slowly. So you can see we keep the drum, the hats, we get rid of the kick and the bass, but we kick the drum and we're gonna remove them after, so this way it's a bit of a smoother transition. You don't get rid of everything all in the same time, otherwise it sounds weird. The pad is gonna be introduced slower. Let me put like this. Alright, so here I build tension by opening the filter of the pad slowly, so it's getting clearer and clearer, and you can hear it more and more. I have as well on the mix down, so these are kind of my master SFX that I will use to build tension. I have this riser effect rack, which is, you can hear it if I exaggerate. I exaggerate it, so like this you can hear what kind of effect it does. So it does that, so the more you go, the more it goes up. So the more it's filtered, the more you have delay, the more you have reverb, and the more it's raising the tension. And then I use this flanger effect here on the master to create this weird flangey effect. It's just add a bit of movement and character to your break. And yeah, then we drop and we go into drop 2 and verse. So we start with no drums. We get rid of the main chord, we get rid of the chord 3, which were like our main hook chords element. We keep chord 1 and chord 2, but for example chord 1 is gonna be low pass filter. You can see how down the filter is, so you hear it a bit less than when it was, for example, here. So we put it in the background. We don't get rid of it, because if we get rid of it, I feel like it's missing something and we lose a little bit the feeling of the track. And same goes with chord 2. Anyway, chord 2 was already muffled and more like in the background, so this doesn't move. But yeah, then we're gonna have our you have some flanger on the pad as well. Then slowly we introduce the hat. So first the hat from Tanzbar, then it's gonna be the 909. Open hat. We introduce this blippy. So yeah, this part was really like to take a break from the chord side. It's a kind of a pad, more slower, like a chill vibe, let's say. And before we're gonna start again into chorus 2, where we're gonna reintroduce more main element. And speaking of chorus 2, so yes, now we're gonna enter in chorus 2, and you have obviously the chord main, which is starting back. So you have a slight low cut, obviously, to help the transition. And you have your ride coming. And here we start to have the part where I say you have A plus B, so you have like the chorus one and the verse playing together, like both parts playing together, the pad plus the chord. So quite a rich harmonically part, but it's creating this kind of big climax. And you have like a heavy drums, the ride which is driving the beat, and yeah, it goes like this for 16 bar. Then you had some shaker. And then after that was it, we needed to finish the track to go into the intro. So before to go into the intro, we have to do kind of a final break to get rid of the element, you know, slowly. So here again, same technique, we don't remove everything in the same time. We first have the kick, bass and the shaker, and then we will get rid of the hat a bit later. Same with the synth, you can see that the main chord is still playing where the chorus 3 is not playing. So it's just to help the transition to be a bit smoother, and yeah. A little look at here. So yeah, you could see here I use a low cut as well before to help the transition, and you can see like all the filters are going down, so this really helped the transition to kind of get rid slowly of all of the element. And then we start again, but just with one hat. We don't use the 909 hat, we don't use the shaker. We're not gonna hear the main chord anymore, not gonna hear the chord 3 anymore. The pad is kind of slowing down by itself, and yeah, that's our global arrangement. So then one main thing of this track, it's all about automation, modulation, variation, because you don't have that many elements. You can see I actually have like 14 elements. So it's all about keeping the same element but making it evolve and modulate a lot. So I've done that mainly with the synth. So for example, you can see here with chord 1, I played a lot with the cutoff. So either to add some quick modulation here where I will open, close the filter, like just to kind of add modulation. Sometimes it's more like to introduce a sound, like at the beginning, you see, to kind of make a fade in. Then it allowed me to put it more in the background during the time where the pad is playing. But I also have this modulation. You see here is basically the fold of the synth. This is gonna kind of change the tone a little bit of the synth, but it's like, I like to say like it's changing the sound without changing the sound. So you can hear it's the same sound repeating over and over, but you can also hear that it's somehow changing. You cannot really nail what is changing, but something is changing, and this kind of trick your brain and kind of make the sound impossible to be bored of. And so that's a great way to modulate modulate that. You can see I also have a LFO here modulating the wavetable position of the oscillator 1, and that's gonna constantly add movement to your track. I also have this spike here are like the send to the return. Like I said, it was a kind of, one is a washout effect, one is like kind of a pitched granular effect. You see, one is this pitched granular effect, one is more this reverse effect, and the first one is the washout effect. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, that's already a lot just for one cent, but yeah, that's all the variation that it goes into. Then you have the chord main, where I just have the return, which has some like kind of SFX here and there, which is going to the return, but it's from time to time, and you can see it's never on the same note. You can see the pattern, like it's like 8 bar, and it's just playing like the 4 time on the first 4 bar, and here's on the 4th one, here's on the 3rd one, here's on the 2nd one. It's always changing. It's just to add variation, to never be like the same thing all the time. Here basically what's happening, I don't have that much modulation because I have the LFO here which is modulating the filter, so I don't need to do it manually. It's just the LFO doing it. Here I could have played with the frequency, maybe here making modulate a little bit more, but you kind of get too much change, so I leave it more or less straightforward like this. But yeah, because this tab is not playing that often, you can kind of keep it a little bit more linear. It doesn't need to always change everything all the time. Then we have chord 3 with again a bit more. Sometimes the sound will be filtered more than other times, just add variation. I also have like the pan, so sometimes it will be like more on the right, sometimes a bit more on the left, sometimes more in the middle. It's just like to add variation this way, the chord is not playing all the time at the same position. Then we have the pad, so you have the frequency, which is just basically to introduce the filter. It's like a fade in, fade out modulation. And then you have this phaser flanger effect that is playing from time to time. Like here now. The default sounds have some flanger phaser effect, but here it's like a more pronounced one. The one they have by default is more like a subtle to add variation modulation. Here it's more like a pronounced effect. So yeah, this talking about modulation automation, this is a great way to add variation. It's using phaser flanger. You have with some slow LFO rate, it's making you filter move a lot. Here you can see I have a bandpass filter which is modulating by a LFO. That's a lot of slight modulation that's really add variation to your sound. Even the filter from the delay, it's modulated by a LFO. It's great to have different rates. So for example, here I have 6, here I have 6, but then here I will have 8, 8, 6. So like this, you have all of your LFO, which are never really resyncing all together in the same time. They are all like kind of shifting, and that's great. So it's kind of polymeter, but with automation and constantly add variation. So that's a great way to add modulation variation to your sound as well, using LFO as much as you can. Obviously, you don't want to overdo it as well, because sometimes you will think like, okay, I'm gonna automate everything, modulate everything, but then it's kind of get lost because it's always changing. So you have to find kind of the right balance. But yeah, I definitely like to use stuff like the autopan to make the sound around your head. Or even here, you can hear it going left and right. On the noise, I have this LFO modulating this bed EQ, so it's creating this sweeping filter effect. So yeah, I think both a combination of automated LFO variation and a combination of a bit of manual variation is great to really add some movement and make your track a bit more interesting. Now you can see it was as well some modulation on the mix down, which are like my master effects. So I explained to you it's the low cut. You have a phaser flanger effect, which is here as well more pronounced, that I use during the break, and this riser as well that I use during the break. This is all to bring tension to your track, or like to help the transition. And yeah, the 3 return track, so this is the washout effect. It's just a reverb, and you see 100% with a long decay. So when you send your sound in that, kind of transforming your original sound into a kind of a washout sound, like just full of reverb and noise, and this as well are like pitched delay and reversed as well. I talked about it a bit last week, that I tend to create some kind of weird SFX for the transition, and I use it mainly with Chord 1, but you can see I use with Chord Main as well a little bit. So now let's talk about mixing. So if you're familiar with my video, you probably know what I'm about to say. I like to mix as I produce because for me it's always easier to make sure every time I add a new element, it's fit perfectly the rest of the track. And it's usually a great way to know as well if an element is really good for the track or not, because if you feel like it doesn't really sit in the mix, or that's probably mean like this track is not made for this song. So for me, it's all about sound selection and like which sample you're gonna select, or which preset you're gonna use, or which preset you're gonna create. Make sure you put them all together perfectly. Make sure that they all match perfectly. And then when you do that, you shouldn't have that much mixings to do. It should be just some saturation to add some extra harmonics or loudness, and then a bit of EQ just to boost some frequency or cut some. And then it's just about the volume and the panning. But then that's it, because I personally think that especially with techno, delay and reverb, which I can consider like a mixing effect, are way much more about sound design than mixing itself. You don't really use reverb to kind of put your scent into a mix. You put it like to add color, to add character. Same with the delay. You're gonna add delay to add some groove or to add some character, especially with the techno, which is like what's gonna give all the character of your sound. So my advice would be first to focus on your sound selection, then having the volume at the right level. It's super important as well. So here it's a bit tricky because I cannot really give you advice or how you should put your level, because it depends, obviously each track is different, but that's something that it's important and not to be neglected. And then it's EQ. You can see, we can go over my track and you will see what I mean. Like here it's a bit of EQ on the kick, but it doesn't, it's very subtle. And then you can see it's just like reverb, drum bass I like to use lately. I talked about it last week, but it's great to add harmonics to make things louder, a bit more compact. You have the drive, which is gonna have a bit of harmonics. You have the compressor, which is gonna kind of glue everything. You have then the crunch, which is gonna again add some extra harmonics. And I found it makes you sound a bit more modern. And the thing with crunch, you're gonna have a lot of extra harmonics, and damp is gonna kind of allow you to reduce this very high, harsh frequency. And then transient, you can use positively, and it's gonna kind of add transient to your sound. But I like to use it negatively because it kind of acts as a gate, which means that under a certain level it will shut down your level. I like to use this after a reverb because, for example, you will have a reverb with a long tail, so you will feel like your sound is in a big space. The problem is that when you have a long tail, it's obviously overlapping with other sound. We can create a muddy mix. The great thing with the transient negatively, it acts as a gate, so you can shut down the tail of this reverb, and you have both worlds. You have, because now you have your reverb tail, which is shut down, so you still have the feeling of a large room because you have a long decay, but actually this decay is shut down by the gate, so it's kind of cut the messy tail that the reverb has. And then I use EQ. Like I say, I like to use EQ. Obviously, you get rid of the frequency you don't like. It will be mainly like cutting the low frequency, which are unnecessary. So this depends for each track. Sometimes you don't really need to cut them if you don't feel to cut them. It depends how rich is your track. And I will boost the frequency I like. You can cut some. I rarely cut you low, especially except if there is really one I don't like. But most of the time, I will just like boost the one I like, because the thing is, when you create your own sound, when you sound design, or when you sound design your own sound, you can control all of these parameters with your filter, your envelope, your oscillator. You can control all of that, so you shouldn't have that much left on the mixing. So it's just sometimes just to boost, to help cut through the mix, or just to enhance a little bit the sound. And then if necessary, you can cut the high or boost. It depends if you can boost if you want to add a bit of air to your sound, or you can cut if you feel like it's a bit too harsh. That's what I would do, but don't overthink it. You can see it's just like cut, boost, cut, and then all the effect is basically like sound design effects. It's like to add, like for example here the delay is to add movement. Here, yeah, obviously the reverb is to put your sound into a space, and not too much amount of dry wet. This is something I can advise you as well to improve your mix. If you feel like a track is a bit muddy, always keep an eye on your dry wet signal, even for the delay, dry wet as well, and the feedback, because the feedback obviously is gonna make your delay longer and longer. So sometimes if you feel one of your track is a bit muddy, or it's like a bit busy, reducing the dry wet a little bit, until you feel the difference, and then you can stop. Same with the feedback, it can help you improve. Filter the delay as well sometimes can help. Like if you, instead of having the delay on the whole spectrum, you can filter it. Most of Ableton delay have a filter, so you can really like shape properly. Then again, you don't have to compromise the character and sound design part, so that's where you have to be careful, because sometimes what can happen is then you change because you want to improve your mix, but then the feeling and the character of your original sounds change, so you don't want that. You want to keep this original character, so it's always a bit of a trade-off, but yeah, case by case situation. And yeah, obviously where I didn't talk about, but sidechain, obviously it's kind of the basic things. I think if you make music, it's the first things you're gonna have to learn, sidechain. And here, like the EQ, it's like to add character, distortion, erosion, is everything is to add character, delay is for the dub delay effect, reverb as well, sidechain, and then there's a low pass filter to fade in, fade out the sound. So you can see there is no really like secrets mixing things. And yeah, that's pretty much everything about mixing. All right, now let's talk about mastering. So this is what I will call homemade mastering. I call it like this because I don't qualify myself like a mastering engineer, so I don't have like a professional like advice or things to give you to really be a good mastering engineer, but I know a little bit, just enough to make my master sounds good, a bit louder, a bit more compact, a bit more stereo, just enough to be able to kind of see if your track is gonna work into a club, all of that kind of things. But yeah, here are a few things that you can use that can help you master. So always select the part of the track which is usually the loudest, so with the most elements, so in my case here. First thing, utility width will enhance the width, so I put at 120%. Keep in mind that if you don't have beforehand stereo, it will not create stereo, it just enhance stereo if it's already there. And bass in mono under 120 Hz, it's just gonna make everything mono under 120 Hz. Then you have some good compression, so this is just gonna glue everything and make things a bit louder as well. So I kind of have go-to settings for compression on the master, usually a very slow attack around 30 milliseconds. The release, it really depends about if you want a pumping effect or no. Like around here was okay for me. And then a ratio you want to leave around 4 because 2 is too soft and 10 is too strong, like the compression. So yeah. And then after you have threshold and makeup, where you will threshold depend how much you want. Again, this is gonna be too much like this, but then it's really up to you how much you wanna put. And then again, you can go until up what you want. Sometimes you can go super loud, sometimes not too loud. It's really up to you. Here I'm pushing a little bit too much, but yeah, something like that. All right, then I have an EQ to kind of rebalance a little bit. I will usually put a low cut around 30 Hz as well. And then I will boost around 1 kilo and 2-3 kilo. It's just a bad EQ, and this is more like a high share. Then I used another EQ, but more as a mid-side EQ. I was just trying to enhance the stereo a bit more. On the middle side, I will boost around 1 kilo and like the high end, and obviously the low frequency. And on the side, I like to kind of do, you can see that they are kind of opposite to each other. Usually it's work well to enhance the stereo. Nothing crazy, but it does the job. Then it's just set some extra harmonic with saturator in analog clip. It's just like 30%, just to make things a bit louder. Then I use color limiter because I like to use tape usually on master. It always had stereo and warmth to your sound. Ableton doesn't have tape, emulation style plugin, but they have this color limiter, which you can use the saturation here with the color a little bit more close to 1, which is make like a higher color, the higher frequency, and it adds loudness as well. You can see I don't think it's limit that much, but it's gonna really add a lot to your sound. You see, it doesn't really limit, you just cut a little bit better. I really love this plugin. And then the final limiter to really like kind of make things louder, squash it. Well, obviously a big difference in sound. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this hot track. So I hope you guys like the video. I hope you learn a few tricks. If you want to grab the template, the link in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you next week for a new video, guys. Bye bye. Thank you.